You were having fun all day.
Yeah.
Now it's my turn to have fun and go work. I could create a piece of work that totally changes the trajectory of my career. Or I could, wash the dishes and pick up the living room.
What do you mean I can't go talk to Dad? He's just in that, he's just over there. Dad tells me I have to limit my screen time. Dad looks at the screen all day.
What are we modeling?
Yeah.
I am here today with one of the creators that I most admire recently for his work about how to be productive and creative while also being a dad. I am speaking, of course, of Matt Ragland. You had a long history of being a creator, but then you worked for a couple companies and then you came back. Tell me a little bit about that sequence and how did your family schedule and routines have to change as you went through all those phases?
Yeah, so I started working as a creator / freelancer in 2013. In 2015, that's when I started working at ConvertKit. I was employee number 5. I've been working remotely in a non-traditional setting, for a really long time, but since I joined ConvertKit in 2015, I've worked remotely. I haven't had to go into any kind of an office since 2012. And when you can work, anywhere,
Or anytime.
anytime. The risk that you have to guard against is that you don't end up working everywhere all the time.
Seriously.
And so that first year, in retrospect, ended up being quite a challenge from a time management perspective because I didn't have as many of the cultural or work-oriented guardrails that I had been able to lean on subconsciously.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that funny that there was an era that it was freedom, you're like in a cafe in Bali, and slowly we seem to just be adding back maybe a little bit different style, but most of that structure.
We love structure. There's expectation and safety in structure.
Yeah.
If I'm working in another space that isn't the home, that means that when I come home, I can just be dad. I'm business creator guy when I'm not home. But there were too many instances for a little while, especially as we added in more kids, that they'd just be like, what do you mean I can't go talk to Dad? He's just in that, he's just over there. I was like, well, he's working. And this was actually something that I wanted to ask you about is how do we show our kids what we do
Oh my gosh.
as creators when you could just say hey, here's this chair that I made. Oh, Dad is making this chair. That's great. Dad is growing this food. It's Dad is looking at Dad tells me I have to limit my screen time. Dad looks at the screen all day.
What are we modeling?
Yeah.
Gosh, it is such a thing. I mean, I grew up with an artist for a father, which in many ways gave me kind of a little preview into the creator lifestyle. But he had actually an unattached garage, just like the one we're in. So I've kind of been replicating that unconsciously. I could always go in there at any time, and he would receive me. The more I think about it, that's just totally amazing. I could walk in, and usually he's in flow. He's painting, he's doing what he loves the most. He could always talk to me. He would always give me his attention. I can't remember a time where he was like, no, I'm busy doing something and had to shut the door. Yeah. And I'm like, I aspire to that because I don't think I can do that. I'm on Zoom calls or whatever. Right. And then the other thing is I could join. He's like, you want to do some painting? He'd set me up with a little easel. Here's some paint. And then I get my fingers. Yeah. I'm doing the same thing as Dad. It's easy.
Yeah.
We have 2 kids, and they'll occasionally nap at the same time. And it's
occasionally it's
it's like the heavens open, and you're like, wait a minute. I have a good hour here, maybe 2. I could create a piece of work that totally changes the trajectory of my career. Or I could, wash the dishes and pick up the living room.
You have this time when they're both napping. It may have been that they're tired because they woke up early. Mm-hmm. So I like to do some early morning work time before the kids wake up. But if they wake up at 6, which is not uncommon, and so my 6 to 7 o'clock focused work, deep work block is gone, then I just kind of picking up that 6 o'clock block and putting it in at 2 o'clock. Mm-hmm. It's not a binary, I don't have kids, and so I have all time, and I can optimize myself to the nth degree. And then I have kids, or I have multiple kids, and now I don't have any time. I can't put any of my attention on myself or a side hustle. The thing about optimization that has continued to serve me well is I'm often thinking about how can I compress experiences or opportunities into similar time frames. I rent space in a building that is next to a CrossFit gym. Mm-hmm. If like I'm spending more time with the kids, or I have an extra meeting that I have to do, or a proposal's due for a client, I don't have an hour and a half. Mm-hmm. But I do have 20 to 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. And so I'll just, instead of that block being from 9:30 to 11, it gets compressed to like a 30 to 45 minute block, and it gets moved to 2:30 when they don't have classes and the gym's open. I just do like a compressed 20 to 30 minute thing, and then I just get back to work. Another way that I do this is I try and work out with my kids.
This is such a big mindset shift, because I admit I have that feeling like, okay, if I want to do any workout whatsoever, I have to completely remove myself from the kids. There can be no overlap. And I need basically I have to like hire a babysitter or have my spouse or my mother-in-law watch the kids, which if that's a requirement, I know going forward, if that's a requirement that I place on my workout, I am going to be like tangibly less healthy in my life.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah. Teaching them good habits, and also showing like, hey, this is how you take care of your body. These are ways that we can play together and have fun. Just involving them. I try and do that at least once a week, if not twice.
I keep noticing with my 3-year-old, all he wants is to do what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. All he wants is to be with me, having my experience together. Mm-hmm. And the more, not just with working out, but the more that I try to say that is your activity with your schedule, doing it your way, and then I'm over here, the more difficult things get. What do you find are some of the, like, I guess, keystone habits that if those are in place, everything else seems to go well, and if not, they don't? Like, are there any in your mind that really stand out as the critical ones?
My weekly planning method, I just call the GAP method, GAP itself, and that's orienting very clearly, like each week. Well, when I do the time block, we've kind of referenced that a little bit of looking at and understanding these are the blocks of time that I have to work and to work out. And so moving those around, setting an intention at the beginning of the week of when those, if most things go well, that's when that's when all those things are gonna happen. What's helpful for me about that, because I do love writing things down, bullet journal, analog productivity for me is best for the day to day. Because I love Notion. I've used Evernote. I've used ClickUp. As much as I love those tools and I can get nerdy in them, I get lost in them very often, as well as like, oh, well, I got this notification here, and I want to like I can go down a rabbit hole that isn't always the right thing to do at that time, where I'll set my plan and I'll align with the team, I'll collaborate with the team, but when it comes down to like, this is what I want to do this week, and this is especially what I want to get done today, I use the little analog cards often that Jeff Sheldon put together at UgMonk. The more overwhelmed that I feel at times, or the more scattered, the simpler that I make the system, the more easily that I can take progress on it. Because if I think I have to go into like this great Thomas Frank inspired like tasks database, I love Thomas. I know these are 3 things I have to do. I write them down on a note card, and then it's like, okay, let's get to it.
That's such a good principle. The more overwhelmed you feel, the simpler the system should be to counteract that feeling. My wife and I have noticed is we both have online businesses. We both love it so much that it's like I'll come in after a hard day of work and be like, oh, Lauren, like I really worked hard today. Like I really need to rest. And she's like, no, you have to do this errand and this chore and that because you were having fun all day.
Yeah.
Now it's my turn to have fun and go work.
Yeah.
It's like a complete inversion.
It is. Yeah. Another thing that you learn as a parent very quickly is your ability to make progress and have a big impact in smaller amounts of time than you ever believed was possible. Like I bet like while the kids are sleeping, what you can get done in an hour versus what it used to be is probably it's drastically different. There's a chance that you can put together that strategic plan and do the dishes in that hour and a half when like I wouldn't have gotten anywhere close to that.
I want to talk about your wife.
Yes.
What's her name?
Morgan.
I always look out for mentions of her in your content because I know for my life, my relationship with my wife is the bedrock of everything. Even though she used to work with me in the business, she no longer does. She's still as important as and influential as she was before. I think I saw you mention at one point, you and Morgan had a discussion that she was going to mostly take care of the kids and be in the home, and you were going to be the breadwinner, right? Tell me about that conversation. Like,
Yeah.
how did that go? How did it arise?
It was an evolving conversation. It really was. It evolved over the course of, she worked full time as a nurse, so 3 to 4 days a week, all through Canaan, growing up as our oldest. And then at the beginning of Ben, she was also still working full time. As Ben got a little older, she started working part time, which is 1 to 2 days. She really had a desire. I hope I'm not putting words in her mouth. Kind of surprising to her, because her mom always worked. That she just had a strong desire to be at home with the kids way more often than not, and that was really important to her and important to us. It was an ongoing conversation, but after Locke, right before Locke was born, and since then, it's like this is just what I'm going to do for the foreseeable future.
I thought before having kids that I had pretty good digital boundaries.
Yeah.
I'm not the person to be, I don't think, to be constantly on my phone, or I don't think I'm addicted. But when I spend all day in the digital realm, even if I step out of the office here, turn off all devices, it's like my mind is in at a digital pace that takes hours to get out of.
Yeah, and I think one of the other risks that you have is maybe your day was a little choppy because you're doing something with kids that you didn't expect, or maybe just something that you wanted to do. But then you're like, oh, I have a little, like, it's the ability to do little things in short amount of times. Like, oh, I'm just going to check in on this Slack message, or I bet I can reply to this email in just a couple of minutes while they're in the bath and they don't really need me anyway. I can just pound this out.
Or even more tempting, consuming content.
Right.
It's like, oh, the kids are playing on the floor.
Get some, read wise.
Yeah, or a book. This is a casual book. This is not working.
Not a work book.
And then before I know
fiction.
it,
Fiction.
Then before I know it, I have my notebook out and I'm like surreptitiously, like, hope no one sees me take these notes.
The more that I feel like I'm judging myself on something, ironically, the harder it is to stop. And like, oh, you're doing that thing again. Like, just the awareness. Like, oh, you're doing that thing again. Go ahead and put that away. It's gonna be all right. Nobody really needs you right now. I would keep my phone just plugged in, even in the office upstairs during the night, and that, just having that little bit of friction, be like, oh, I have to go. If it's in my pocket, I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna check this thing. I'm just gonna scroll through something. But if I have to actually walk upstairs, then one, I may not be able to do that at all. But then in the course of the walk, it's much more likely to be like, what are you doing really?
Yeah.
You're walking away from them, or something else that you could be doing, or just resting your brain to go see if you have any new X notifications. Yep. Let's not do that. What's in front of me, what's in my environment. James Clear talks about this a lot, your environment matters on your habits. And so if I can just swap out one input for another. Yeah. So there's a book here instead of the phone. The phone is upstairs. That is also a really helpful thing. It's when the phone charges upstairs and the kids are upstairs, there's no way in the morning I'm going upstairs to try and check my phone at the risk of waking them up. So that's
great.
Introducing those points of friction and distance in the environment is really helpful.
We go to a Waldorf. We take our oldest to a Waldorf school, which is kind of like Montessori.
Yeah.
They have a no media policy. Not only do they not have any kind of media in the school, they don't want us to give them any exposure in the home.
Yeah.
Zero. No screens, no TV, definitely no devices.
Right.
And I really struggle with this because I'm constantly torn between that almost traditional, preserve their childhood, their innocence, keep them in the physical world, and preparing them for the real world, which is largely digital, and I think will be for a long time to come.
Ben Thompson talks about this a lot with stratechery, and I really like his writing, but he's there are downsides, certainly, to social media and technology, but inverse of that is if we didn't have the technology that we have, a lot of things that we take very much for granted would be so much more difficult. The technology, the digital age, I think it does come down to how we model the things that we've talked about, how we model our own relationship to social media, to just technology, screens in general. One of the things that I do like about it, both boys, we'll kind of set them up with these drawing tutorials. So a lot of the drawing practice that Ben has done, that kid has drawn, like he's working on his 10,000 hours drawing. And like a good chunk of it is like, now I get YouTube Premium, and so like there are no ads. This is, you know, kind of philosophically high-minded, but I want to give them access to the good parts while trying to protect for as long as I can against the challenging parts. I don't think they'll have a phone for a long time, like middle school maybe. They're not going to have their own social profiles for a really, really long time. I want to minimize it as much as I can, but I also want to show like the technology and the opportunity that we have in that. It is interesting because so much of our lives has been enabled by technology.
Seriously?
So it's like, how do I communicate the opportunity while safeguarding, especially when they're young, like against some of the risks? It is like, it's one of the biggest parenting challenges.
Yeah.
And I do think like I would rather be more conservative than like whatever about it. The day is coming where, you know, the digital landscape is going to be like one of the like realest things in their lives. And so how do we prepare them for that without making it this like jarring introduction?
Yes. Well, Matt, we could go for a long time more.
Good. This is a lot of
but
fun.
At least as an introduction, this was fantastic.
Thanks.
Where can people follow you if they want to hear more from you?
So you can follow me anywhere on the internet at Matt Ragland, mattragland.com, Matt Ragland on YouTube, starting my own channel back up, and on X, LinkedIn, Instagram. Just follow me at Matt Ragland. Say, hey, I have a newsletter that is, you know, on all of those platforms. But say, hey, thanks so much. I really enjoyed that.
This is Matt Ragland and Tiago, digital dads, which I like that term. Take one. We're cool digital dads.